While I was away caring for my dying mother, my husband's family secretly planned his wedding to his ex-girlfriend, complete with venue bookings and invitation designs. They thought I would never find out, but they underestimated what a private investigator could uncover when a woman's intuition meets strategic action. This is the story of how being excluded from my own marriage led me to discover the truth about the people I had trusted most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Brennan, though for the past 4 years I had been Victoria Castellano, having taken my husband's name when we married in what I believed was a celebration of love and commitment that would last a lifetime. Looking back now, I realize that even our wedding day contained warning signs I was too trusting to recognize at the time. The warning signs were subtle, but persistent. During our engagement, my future mother-in-law, Elena Castellano, had made countless comments about how different I was from the women the family usually welcomed. She would mention repeatedly how my background in nonprofit development work was admirable, but quite different from the business-oriented careers that characterized the women in their social circle. Her tone was always carefully modulated to sound supportive, but the underlying message was clear that I represented a departure from their established expectations and preferences. Elena's comparisons became more pointed when she would reference Michael's previous relationship with Isabella Rodriguez, who had been part of their social circle since childhood, and whose family owned a successful chain of luxury hotels throughout the Southwest. Isabella had attended the same private schools as Michael, shared the same cultural background, and understood the expectations that came with being part of the Castellano family's business and social obligation. During our engagement period, Elena would often share stories about family vacations that included Isabella, business partnerships between the Rodriguez and Castellano families, and social events where Isabella had served as Michael's companion before we began dating. These stories were presented as fond memories rather than deliberate undermining, but they created a consistent narrative that Isabella had been seamlessly integrated into the family in ways that I was still struggling to achieve. Michael's response to these comments was typically dismissive, rather than protective. When I expressed concern about his mother's frequent references to Isabella and the implicit comparisons being made, he would characterize my observations as oversensitivity and suggest that I was misinterpreting innocent family story. His unwillingness to address these dynamics directly should have been a clearer indication of where his loyalties ultimately resided. The first 2 years of our marriage were characterized by my persistent efforts to find my place within the Castellano family structure, while building my own career and maintaining the independence that had attracted Michael to me initially. I continued working at the Community Foundation of Santa Fe, where I managed grant programs focused on educational equity and community development. The work was meaningful and aligned with my values, but it required irregular hours and frequent travel to rural communities throughout New Mexico. My schedule created ongoing tension with Elena's expectations about family participation and social obligation. The Castellano family maintained an active calendar of business dinners, charity galas, and social events that were considered essential for maintaining their standing in Santa Fe's business community. My work commitments often conflicted with these events, leading to repeated conversations about priorities and commitment to family obligation. Elena's approach to these conflicts was to express understanding about my career, while simultaneously making clear that family expectations were not negotiable. She would say things like, "Of course Victoria's work is important to her, but surely the foundation can manage without her for one evening when we have important guests." These statements created pressure to choose between professional responsibilities and family harmony, while making it clear which choice was expected. The dynamic became more complicated when Isabella began appearing at family events again approximately 18 months after our wedding. Her presence was explained as natural given the long-standing friendship between the families and her recent return to Santa Fe, after completing her MBA at Northwestern. Elena was particularly enthusiastic about reconnecting with Isabella and ensuring that she felt welcomed back into their social circle. Isabella's reintegration into family events was managed with careful attention to optics and social dynamics. She was never presented as competition for me or as someone whose relationship with Michael was anything other than historical friendship. However, her presence created opportunities for conversations about shared memories, mutual friends, and business opportunities that excluded me, while highlighting the depth of her connection to the family. During these gatherings, I began to notice patterns in how family members interacted with Isabella versus how they interacted with me. With Isabella, conversations flowed naturally and included references to shared experiences, inside jokes, and assumptions about common knowledge regarding family history and social connection. With me, interactions required more explanation and context, and I often felt like an outsider trying to understand dynamics that were second nature to everyone else. The contrast was particularly evident during business discussions, which frequently occurred during family gatherings. Isabella could contribute meaningfully to conversations about real estate development, hospitality industry trends, and investment opportunities, because of her family's business background and her recent MBA education. My expertise in nonprofit management and community development was respected but considered peripheral to the family's primary business interest. Michael's behavior during these interactions was revealing in ways that I did not fully understand at the time. He would become more animated and engaged when Isabella was present, sharing stories and perspectives that he rarely discussed with me. Their conversations had an ease and familiarity that suggested ongoing communication and shared interests that extended beyond the formal family gatherings where I observed them together. The third year of our marriage brought increased pressure around starting a family, with Elena making frequent references to her desire for grandchildren and her concerns about waiting too long to begin having children. These conversations were framed as general family planning discussions, but they consistently emphasized Elena's specific vision for how her future grandchildren should be raised and educated. Elena's expectations about child rearing reflected the same cultural and social priorities that had created tension around my career and family participation. She envisioned grandchildren who would attend private schools, participate in traditional cultural celebrations, and eventually join the family business, or pursue careers that would enhance the family's social and economic standing. My background and values were not necessarily incompatible with these goals, but Elena's approach suggested doubt about my commitment to raising children according to family standards and tradition. The pressure to start a family created additional strain in my marriage with Michael, who had become increasingly distant and preoccupied with business responsibilities that required extensive travel and irregular hours. Our conversations about having children revealed fundamental differences in our assumptions about parenting, lifestyle, and long-term goals that had not been adequately discussed during our engagement and early marriage. These differences became more pronounced when my mother's health began deteriorating during the fall of our third year of marriage. Margaret Brennan had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 months earlier, and her condition was progressing more rapidly than her oncology team had initially projected. The treatment options were limited, and primarily focused on managing pain and maintaining quality of life for whatever time remained. My mother lived in Portland, Oregon, where she had relocated after my father's death 5 years earlier to be closer to my aunt and uncle who could provide support as she aged. The distance between Santa Fe and Portland meant that providing meaningful support during her illness required extended visits that would take me away from my work and family obligations in New Mexico. When it became clear that my mother's condition was terminal and that she would need intensive care and support during her final months, I knew that I would need to spend significant time in Portland to help coordinate her care and spend meaningful time with her before she passed away. This decision created the opening that Michael's family had apparently been waiting for to implement plans that would have been impossible while I was present and aware of their activity. The conversation with Michael about my need to spend extended time in Portland revealed aspects of his character and priorities that I had not previously recognized or had chosen to overlook. Rather than expressing support for my desire to care for my dying mother, he focused primarily on the inconvenience that my absence would create for family and social obligations. His response suggested that he viewed my family responsibilities as secondary to my duties as his wife and a member of the Castellano family. Elena's reaction to my travel plans was even more revealing. She expressed sympathy for my mother's condition while simultaneously emphasizing the importance of maintaining family commitments and social appearances during my absence. Her comments suggested that she viewed my extended absence as an opportunity rather than a temporary family emergency that required accommodation and understanding. The arrangements I made for my absence included detailed coordination with my colleagues at the Community Foundation to ensure that grant programs would continue operating effectively, communication with Michael about household responsibilities and financial management, and discussions with Elena about family events and social obligations that I would miss during my time in Portland. What I did not realize was that my departure for Portland created the opportunity that Michael's family had been planning for, possibly for months or even years before my mother's illness provided the perfect cover for implementing their scheme. The trust I had placed in my husband and his family, despite the ongoing tensions and subtle undermining I had experienced, was about to be revealed as fundamentally misplaced. The evening before I left for Portland, Michael's behavior was notably different from his usual routine. He was more attentive and affectionate than he had been in months, expressing concern about my mother's condition and assuring me that he would handle everything in Santa Fe while I was away. His reassurances felt genuine at the time, and I interpreted his increased attention as evidence that our marriage was stronger than the recent tensions had suggested. Elena also made a point of calling to wish me well and to express her support for my decision to care for my mother during her final illness. She assured me that the family understood my priorities and that I should not worry about anything happening in Santa Fe while I was focused on my mother's needs. Her tone was warmer and more supportive than it had been during many of our previous interactions, which I interpreted as evidence that she was finally beginning to accept me as a legitimate member of the family. The support and understanding that both Michael and Elena expressed during my final days in Santa Fe should have been comforting, but looking back, I realized that their behavior was more consistent with people who were relieved to see me leave rather than family members who would genuinely miss my presence and support during a difficult time. As I boarded the plane to Portland on a cold February morning, I believed that I was leaving behind a marriage and family relationships that were solid enough to withstand a temporary separation while I cared for my dying mother. I had no way of knowing that my absence would provide the cover for betrayal that would fundamentally change everything I thought I knew about my place in Michael's life and his family's acceptance of our marriage. The foundation of trust that I believed supported my marriage was about to be revealed as an elaborate illusion that had been maintained only as long as it served the purposes of people who had never truly accepted me as a permanent member of their family. The careful planning and coordination that would unfold during my absence demonstrated that my exclusion had been intended from the beginning, waiting only for the right opportunity to be implemented without my knowledge or consent. The most painful realization was still ahead of me, but even in those final moments before departure, part of me recognized that something fundamental was changing. The relief I saw in Michael's eyes as he said goodbye, the excessive reassurance from Elena about handling family matters in my absence, and the subtle sense that I was being managed rather than supported all suggested that my departure was more welcome than anyone was willing to acknowledge direct. Trust once broken can never be fully restored to its original state. The foundation that I believed supported my marriage was about to be tested in ways that would reveal its true strength and durability. What I was about to discover during my time away would transform not only my understanding of my marriage but also my understanding of my own strength and capability when faced with the ultimate betrayal from the people I had trusted most completely. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As my plane lifted off from Albuquerque heading toward Portland, I had no idea that my phone was already buzzing with messages I would not see for hours. Messages that, if I had received them in time, might have changed everything that was about to unfold. But perhaps some discoveries are meant to happen exactly when we are strong enough to handle them, and when we are far enough away from the deception to see it clearly for what it truly is. What I was about to learn during those first few days in Portland would force me to question everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my place in the Castellano family, and my own judgment about the people I had chosen to trust with my heart and my future. The real question was not whether I could survive what was coming, but whether I was strong enough to seek the truth regardless of how devastating it might prove to be. The hospice facility in Portland, where my mother spent her final weeks, was a place designed to provide comfort and dignity during life's most difficult transition. The Rosehaven Care Center occupied a converted Victorian mansion surrounded by carefully maintained gardens that offered peaceful views from every window. It was here, while holding my mother's hand during her lucid moments and managing the complex emotions of impending loss, that I first began to notice the subtle changes in my husband's communication patterns that would eventually lead me to uncover the truth about my marriage. During my first week in Portland, Michael's phone calls came regularly each evening, usually around 7 o'clock Mountain Time, when he would be finishing dinner and preparing for his evening routine. These conversations followed a predictable pattern that initially felt comforting in its consistency. He would ask about my mother's condition, share brief updates about his work and family activities, and express concern about my emotional well-being during this difficult period. However, as the days progressed, I began to notice that our conversations were becoming shorter and more perfunctory. Michael's questions about my mother felt obligatory rather than genuinely concerned, and his updates about events in Santa Fe lacked the detail and spontaneity that had characterized our communication throughout our marriage. More significantly, he seemed reluctant to discuss specific family activities or social events, offering only vague references to business dinners and family gatherings without the names, locations, or amusing anecdotes that had typically filled our conversation. The shift in communication style was subtle enough that I initially attributed it to the stress and emotional weight of managing family and business responsibilities while I was away. Michael had always been more comfortable with structured routines than with adapting to changing circumstances, and my extended absence represented a significant disruption to our normal pattern. I assumed that his more distant communication reflected his discomfort with the temporary changes rather than any fundamental issues in our relationship. My mother, despite her deteriorating physical condition, remained mentally sharp and emotionally perceptive during most of our time together. Margaret Brennan had spent 35 years as a high school counselor, developing an ability to recognize subtle changes in behavior and emotional patterns that served her well in understanding the dynamics affecting the people she cared about. During our conversations about my marriage and family relationships, she began asking questions that revealed her growing concern about what she was observing in my descriptions of recent interactions. During our third week together, as I was helping my mother with her evening medication routine, she made an observation that would prove to be more prescient than either of us realized at the time. She had been listening to my end of the evening phone call with Michael, noting the brief duration and formal tone that had become characteristic of our recent conversation. After I ended the call, my mother looked at me with the expression of gentle concern that I remembered from childhood moments when she needed to address difficult topics with sensitivity and care. She asked whether I had noticed any changes in Michael's behavior or family dynamics since my departure for Portland. Her question was phrased carefully to avoid suggesting specific concerns while inviting me to share any observations or worries I might have been hesitating to acknowledge. The conversation that followed forced me to articulate patterns and concerns that I had been noticing but avoiding confronting directly. I told my mother about the shortened phone calls, Michael's vague responses about family activities, and Elena's unusual silence during the past 2 weeks. I also shared my growing sense that something significant was happening in Santa Fe that Michael was choosing not to discuss with me. My mother's response revealed both her counseling expertise and her protective instincts as someone who loved me unconditionally. She suggested that the changes I was describing could indicate that Michael was struggling with the emotional demands of my absence, and might be withdrawing rather than expressing his feelings directly. However, she also acknowledged that the patterns I was observing could suggest that something more concerning was occurring that Michael was actively concealing from me. The wisdom my mother shared during that conversation reflected decades of experience helping young people navigate complex relationship dynamics and recognize warning signs of behavior that might indicate larger problems. She emphasized that trust in relationships required open communication and mutual transparency, particularly during challenging circumstances that tested the strength of partnership and commitment. More importantly, my mother encouraged me to trust my own perceptions and instincts rather than dismissing concerns because they were uncomfortable to confront. She reminded me that the ability to recognize and respond to changing dynamics was a strength rather than a weakness, and that seeking clarity about concerning behavior was responsible rather than paranoid. The conversation with my mother planted seeds of doubt that made me more attentive to details and patterns that I might otherwise have overlooked or rationalized. During subsequent phone calls with Michael, I began asking more specific questions about his activities and family interaction. His responses became increasingly evasive and general, reinforcing my growing sense that important information was being withheld from me. The turning point came during my 4th week in Portland, when Michael called nearly 2 hours later than his usual time and seemed flustered and distracted throughout our conversation. When I asked about the delay, he offered an explanation about an unexpected business meeting that ran longer than anticipated. However, his account of the meeting lacked the specific details and frustrations that typically characterized his descriptions of challenging work situations. More concerning was Michael's response when I asked about family activities and whether he had seen Elena and other family members during the week. His answer was notably vague, mentioning briefly that he had attended a family dinner but providing no details about the occasion, the attendees, or the conversations that had taken place. This represented a significant departure from his usual pattern of sharing family dynamics and social interactions in considerable detail. When I pressed for more information about the family dinner, Michael became noticeably uncomfortable and attempted to change the subject to my mother's condition and my own emotional state. His reluctance to discuss family activities that had previously been a regular topic of conversation created additional suspicion about what might be occurring in Santa Fe during my absence. The following day, I decided to call Elena directly to check in about family activities and express my appreciation for their support during my mother's illness. This call would provide crucial information that began to reveal the scope of what was being concealed from me. Elena's response to my unexpected call was revealing in several ways that I did not fully understand at the time. She seemed surprised to hear from me and required several moments to compose herself before engaging in normal conversation. Her initial questions about my mother's condition felt perfunctory, lacking the warmth and concern that had characterized her communication during my departure from Santa Fe. More significantly, when I asked about recent family activities and gatherings, Elena provided information that directly contradicted what Michael had told me about his schedule and commitment. She mentioned several events and meetings that Michael had apparently attended without mentioning them to me, including social gatherings and business dinners that seemed to occur more frequently than would be normal during a period when family members were supposedly managing additional responsibilities in my absence. Elena's description of these events included references to attendees and social dynamics that suggested a level of coordination and planning that extended beyond routine family obligations. She mentioned several gatherings that had included people from their extended social circle, including families that I recognized as long-standing friends, but who had not been mentioned in any of Michael's recent updates about his activity. Most concerning was Elena's casual reference to Isabella's increased presence at family events, described as natural given her recent return to Santa Fe and the family's desire to help her re-establish social connections in the community. Elena's tone suggested that Isabella's participation in family activities had become routine rather than occasional, representing a significant change from the dynamics that had existed before my departure. When I asked Elena to clarify the frequency and nature of Isabella's participation in family events, her response became noticeably more careful and measured. She emphasized that Isabella's presence was simply a reflection of long-standing family friendships and her need for social support while rebuilding her life in Santa Fe. However, Elena's explanation felt rehearsed rather than spontaneous, suggesting that she had anticipated questions about Isabella's involvement and had prepared responses designed to minimize concern. The conversation with Elena left me with more questions than answers, but it also provided concrete evidence that significant family activities were occurring without my knowledge,
and that Michael had been deliberately withholding information about these events during our phone conversation. The discrepancies between Michael's accounts and Elena's information could not be explained by simple oversight or different perspectives on the same event. That evening, when Michael called at his usual time, I decided to test his honesty by asking specific questions about the events that Elena had mentioned during our conversation. His responses revealed that he had been systematically concealing information about family activities and social gatherings, providing vague or misleading accounts when direct lies would have been too obvious to maintain. When I asked Michael about a dinner party that Elena had mentioned, he initially claimed no knowledge of the event before seeming to remember it as a small family gathering that was not worth mentioning. His description of the event contradicted Elena's account in several important details, including the number of attendees, the purpose of the gathering, and the level of planning that had been involved. Most revealing was Michael's response when I mentioned that Elena had told me about Isabella's regular participation in family events. He became defensive and irritated, suggesting that I was reading too much into normal social interactions, and that my concern about Isabella's presence reflected insecurity rather than legitimate questions about family dynamics. Michael's defensive reaction provided crucial insight into his awareness that the situation with Isabella was problematic and that my concerns were justified rather than the product of insecurity or misunderstanding. His attempt to characterize my questions as unreasonable suggested that he understood exactly why I would be concerned if I knew the full extent of what was occurring in my absence. The phone conversation ended with tension and unresolved questions that made it clear that my marriage was facing challenges that extended far beyond the temporary stress of my extended absence. Michael's unwillingness to provide honest information about his activities and family interactions suggested that something significant was being concealed that would likely have serious implications for our relationship. After ending the call, I sat in my mother's room processing the reality that my husband was lying to me about his activities while I was caring for my dying mother. The betrayal felt devastating not just because of the deception itself, but because it was occurring during a period when I was emotionally vulnerable and dependent on his support and honesty. My mother, who had been resting during my phone conversation but had apparently heard enough to understand that something concerning was occurring, opened her eyes and asked whether I wanted to talk about what had happened. Her offer to listen and provide guidance during this crisis demonstrated the kind of unconditional support that I had thought I could expect from my husband but was clearly not receiving. The conversation with my mother that followed would prove to be one of the most important discussions of my adult life, providing both emotional support and practical guidance that would enable me to navigate the crisis that was unfolding. Her wisdom and perspective would help me understand that the situation I was facing required careful planning and strategic thinking rather than emotional reactions or confrontational approaches. My mother's first observation was that the patterns I was describing suggested systematic deception rather than simple omissions or miscommunication. The level of coordination required to maintain consistent false information across multiple family members indicated planning and intentionality that could not be explained by temporary poor judgment or emotional confusion. More importantly, my mother helped me recognize that discovering the truth about what was occurring in Santa Fe would require more than continued phone conversations and direct questions that Michael had already demonstrated he was willing to answer dishonest. If I wanted to understand the full scope of what was being concealed from me, I would need to gather information through other means that did not depend on the cooperation of people who had already proven themselves unreliable.
The guidance my mother provided during that conversation would ultimately lead me to make the decision that would expose the truth about my marriage and my husband's family in ways that would fundamentally change my understanding of the people I had trusted most completely. Her support and wisdom during this crisis demonstrated the kind of love and loyalty that I had believed existed in my marriage, but was learning had been an illusion maintained only as long as it served other people's purposes. The foundation of trust that had supported my marriage was crumbling, but the foundation of strength and wisdom that my mother had helped me build throughout my life was proving solid enough to support me through whatever revelations were still to come. The question was whether I had the courage to seek the truth regardless of how devastating it might prove to be, and whether I was strong enough to act on that truth once I understood its full implications for my future. The decision that would change the trajectory of my life crystallized during a sleepless night in my mother's hospice room, as I sat watching her peaceful breathing and contemplating the growing evidence that my marriage was built on foundations far more fragile than I had ever imagined. The weight of choosing between willful ignorance and potentially devastating truth pressed down on me with an intensity that made it impossible to continue avoiding the reality of my situation. My mother's condition had stabilized somewhat during our 5th week together, providing us with precious time for deeper conversations about life, relationships, and the difficult choices that define our character when we face moments of crisis. Her decades of experience as a counselor had taught her that the most important decisions often come disguised as impossible choices between what we want to believe and what we need to know. During one of our evening conversations, as the Oregon rain created a gentle rhythm against the hospice windows, my mother shared wisdom that would ultimately give me the courage to seek truth regardless of the consequence. She told me that in her years of counseling young people through relationship crises, she had observed that the people who emerged strongest were invariably those who chose to face reality directly rather than constructing elaborate justifications for avoiding uncomfortable truth. The conversation began when I confessed to my mother that I was terrified of what I might discover if I investigated the discrepancies in Michael's communication and Elena's casual revelations about family activities that seemed to be occurring without my knowledge. Part of me wanted to believe that there were innocent explanations for the patterns I was observing, and that my suspicions were the product of stress and grief rather than legitimate concerns about deception. My mother listened with the patient attention that had made her effective in helping countless students navigate complex emotional situations throughout her career. When I finished expressing my fears and uncertainties, she asked me a question that cut directly to the heart of my dilemma. She wanted to know whether I believed that my marriage could survive and thrive based on a foundation of willful ignorance about my husband's honesty and commitment. The question forced me to confront the reality that my current approach of hoping for innocent explanations while avoiding direct investigation was actually a choice to accept whatever deception might be occurring. By refusing to seek clear information about Michael's activities and the family dynamics that were developing in my absence, I was essentially choosing to remain in a marriage that might be fundamentally dishonest rather than risking the discovery of betrayal. My mother helped me understand the choice I was facing was not between a happy marriage and a devastating discovery, but between a marriage based on truth and mutual respect versus a relationship maintained through deception and willful ignorance. Her guidance helped me recognize that genuine security and happiness could only exist in relationships built on honest communication and shared commitment to transparency. The wisdom she shared about facing difficult truths resonated with lessons I had learned throughout my career in nonprofit development, where success required accurate assessment of community needs and honest evaluation of program effectiveness, rather than optimistic assumptions that ignored challenging reality. The same principles that guided effective community development work applied to personal relationships that required honest evaluation and evidence-based decision-making. As we continued our conversation, my mother encouraged me to consider what kind of person I wanted to be when facing this crisis. She reminded me that difficult circumstances reveal character rather than creating it, and that my response to this situation would define not only my immediate future but also my long-term relationship with my own integrity and self-respect. The conversation with my mother provided the emotional and philosophical foundation for making a decision that felt overwhelming in its potential consequences, but necessary for maintaining my own sense of integrity and self-worth. She helped me understand that seeking truth was not an act of distrust, but an expression of my commitment to building relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. Following that pivotal conversation, I spent the next 2 days carefully considering my options and developing a plan for gathering the information I needed to understand what was actually occurring in Santa Fe during my absence. The approach I developed needed to be thorough enough to provide reliable information while being discreet enough to avoid alerting Michael and his family that I was investigating their activity. The research I conducted into investigative services available in the Santa Fe area revealed several options for gathering information about personal and family situations. Professional investigation services offered comprehensive capabilities for documenting activities, relationships, and communications that could provide the clear evidence I needed to understand my situation accurately. After reviewing multiple firms and their specializations, I selected Davidson Investigative Services, a company with extensive experience in matrimonial investigations and a reputation for discretion and professionalism in handling sensitive family situations. The firm was owned and operated by Sarah Davidson, a former law enforcement officer who had transitioned to private investigation work specifically to help people navigate complex personal crises with dignity and clarity. My initial phone conversation with Sarah Davidson provided immediate reassurance that I was working with someone who understood both the emotional complexity of my situation and the practical requirements for gathering reliable information about my husband's activity. Sarah's approach was professional and compassionate, recognizing that the decision to investigate a spouse represented a significant step that required careful consideration and emotional preparation. Sarah explained that matrimonial investigations typically involved surveillance of daily activities, documentation of social interactions, and verification of information provided about schedules and commitment. The goal was to provide clients with factual information that would enable them to make informed decisions about their relationships based on accurate understanding rather than speculation or partial information. The scope of investigation that Sarah recommended for my situation included surveillance of Michael's activities during evening and weekend hours when social and family interactions were most likely to occur. This would provide documentation of his actual schedule and social activities that could be compared with the information he was providing to me during our phone conversation. Additionally, Sarah suggested investigation of family gatherings and social events that Elena had mentioned to determine the frequency, nature, and participants in activities that were occurring during my absence. This information would help me understand whether the level of social activity and family interaction was consistent with what I would normally expect during a temporary family crisis. Most importantly, Sarah recommended specific investigation of Isabella's involvement in family and social activities to determine whether her presence represented occasional friendly interaction or something more significant that would affect my marriage and family relations. The investigation would document the frequency and nature of Isabella's interactions with Michael and his family without speculation or interpretation. The decision to proceed with professional investigation represented a fundamental shift in how I was approaching my marriage and my relationship with Michael's family. Rather than continuing to hope for innocent explanations or accepting vague reassurances about family activities, I was choosing to gather concrete evidence that would enable me to make informed decisions based on facts rather than assumptions. The process of engaging Davidson Investigative Services required providing detailed background information about my marriage, family relationships, and the specific concerns that had led me to seek professional assistance. Sarah's questions helped me organize my observations and concerns into a comprehensive picture that would guide the investigation and ensure that all relevant areas were examined thoroughly. The information I provided included timelines of changes in communication patterns, specific discrepancies between Michael's accounts and Elena's revelations, and background information about Isabella's history with the family and her recent reintegration into their social activity. This comprehensive briefing enabled Sarah to develop an investigation plan that would address all of my concerns while maintaining the discretion necessary to avoid detection. Sarah's professional assessment of my situation provided validation that my concerns were legitimate and that the patterns I had observed were consistent with situations that warranted investigation. Her experience with similar cases helped me understand that my decision to seek professional assistance was reasonable and appropriate given the circumstances I was facing. The timeline for the investigation was designed to provide comprehensive information within a 2-week period that would allow me to gather evidence while still maintaining my presence in Portland for my mother's continued care. Sarah assured me that the investigation could be conducted without any indication to Michael or his family that their activities were being monitored and documented. The cost of the investigation represented a significant expense that required careful consideration of my financial resources and priorities. However, I realized that the investment in obtaining accurate information about my marriage was essential for making informed decisions about my future, that could have far greater financial and emotional implications than the cost of the investigation itself. The decision to proceed with professional investigation also required emotional preparation for the possibility that the evidence might confirm my worst suspicions about Michael's honesty and commitment to our marriage. Sarah counseled me that investigation results could range from reassuring evidence that my concerns were unfounded to devastating proof of betrayal that would fundamentally change my understanding of my relation. The emotional preparation for potentially devastating discoveries included developing support systems and coping strategies that would enable me to process whatever information the investigation revealed. Sarah provided guidance about maintaining emotional stability during the investigation period and preparing for various scenarios that the evidence might support. My mother's continued presence and support during this period provided crucial emotional stability that enabled me to proceed with the investigation while continuing to provide appropriate care and attention during her final illness. Her understanding and encouragement helped me maintain confidence that seeking truth was the right choice regardless of what that truth might reveal. The night before I authorized Davidson Investigative Services to begin their work, I experienced a profound sense of both fear and relief about finally taking concrete action to understand my situation clearly. The fear centered on the possibility that the investigation would confirm betrayal that would require difficult decisions about my marriage and my relationship with Michael's family. However, the relief was equally powerful, reflecting my recognition that I was finally choosing to seek truth rather than remaining in uncertainty and willful ignorance about circumstances that were affecting my life and my future. The decision to investigate represented a commitment to making decisions based on facts rather than hope or fear. The authorization I provided to Sarah Davidson the following morning marked a turning point in my approach to my marriage and my own agency in determining my future. Rather than remaining passive and dependent on information provided by people who had already demonstrated their willingness to deceive me, I was taking active steps to gather the evidence I needed to make informed decisions about my life. The investigation would proceed over the following 2 weeks, while I continued caring for my mother and managing the complex emotions associated with her declining health. The parallel processes of saying goodbye to my mother while potentially discovering the truth about my marriage created an intense period of emotional challenge that would test my resilience and determination. The strength I drew from my mother's wisdom and support provided the foundation for facing whatever revelations the investigation might produce. Her guidance about choosing truth over comfortable illusions would prove essential for navigating the discoveries that lay ahead, and for maintaining my integrity and self-respect regardless of what those discoveries revealed about the people I had trusted most completely. The decision to seek professional investigation represented more than just a practical step toward gathering information. It was a declaration of my commitment to living authentically and making decisions based on truth rather than fear or false hope. Whatever the investigation revealed, I would face those revelations with the knowledge that I had chosen courage over denial and truth over comfortable deception. The first photographs arrived in my encrypted email account exactly 72 hours after Sarah Davidson began surveillance operations in Santa Fe. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria during one of my mother's afternoon rest periods when my phone buzzed with the secure notification that would begin to unravel every assumption I had maintained about my marriage and my place within the Castellano family structure. Sarah had warned me that initial evidence might arrive in fragments rather than comprehensive revelations, and that I should prepare myself emotionally for information that would gradually build into a complete picture of the activities occurring during my absence. Her professional experience had taught her that matrimonial investigations typically revealed patterns of deception that had been developing over extended periods rather than sudden changes in behavior that coincided with specific opportunity. The first batch of photographs documented Michael's activities during a Tuesday evening that he had described to me as a quiet night at home, catching up on business correspondence and household responsibility. The timestamp on the images showed a sequence of events that directly contradicted every detail of the account he had provided during our phone conversation that evening. The surveillance documentation began at 6:15 p.m. with photographs of Michael leaving our house dressed in a navy blazer and dress shirt that I recognized as his preferred outfit for family social events. His appearance and demeanor suggested someone preparing for an important social occasion rather than someone planning to spend a quiet evening managing household tasks and business correspondence. The photographic sequence continued with images of Michael arriving at Casa Bella,
an upscale restaurant in downtown Santa Fe that served as a popular venue for family celebrations and business dinners within the Castellano social circle. The restaurant's reputation for discreet private dining rooms and exceptional service made it a frequent choice for occasions that required privacy and sophistication. The most devastating photographs captured Michael's interaction with other dinner guests as they arrived at the restaurant throughout the evening. The images clearly showed Elena greeting him with the familiar warmth reserved for special family occasions, followed by the arrival of several couples I recognized as long-standing family friends who typically attended significant celebrations and important announcements. The final guest to arrive, captured in a series of photographs that would fundamentally alter my understanding of my situation, was Isabella Rodriguez. The images documented her arrival at the restaurant wearing an elegant emerald dress that I had never seen before, accompanied by what appeared to be a carefully coordinated entrance that suggested this was not a casual invitation to join an existing gathering. The photographs of Isabella's greeting with Michael and Elena revealed a level of familiarity and comfort that extended far beyond the polite interaction between family friends. The body language, captured in these images, suggested intimate knowledge of social dynamics and personal relationships that indicated ongoing communication and coordination rather than occasional friendly contact. Sarah's accompanying report provided context for the photographic evidence that helped me understand the significance of what the surveillance had documented. Her professional analysis indicated that the dinner gathering represented a planned event that required advanced coordination among multiple participants, rather than a spontaneous family meal that had expanded to include additional guests. The guest list documented through surveillance suggested that this gathering included people who would typically be invited to significant family announcements or celebrations that required witness and support from the Castellano social network. The presence of long-standing family friends and business associates indicated that this dinner served a purpose that extended beyond casual socializing or routine family interaction. Most concerning was Sarah's analysis of the timing and coordination evident in the arrival patterns of different guests. The surveillance documentation suggested that the sequence of arrivals had been carefully planned to create specific dynamics and interactions that would not have occurred through random or spontaneous gathering of family members and friends. The photographic evidence of this dinner gathering provided concrete proof that Michael had been systematically deceiving me about his activities and family obligations during my absence. The level of planning and coordination required for this event indicated that the deception was intentional and sustained rather than the result of poor communication or misunderstandings about family activity. The emotional impact of receiving this evidence while sitting in a hospital cafeteria surrounded by families dealing with their own crises and challenges created a surreal juxtaposition between my public composure and the private devastation I was experiencing. The photographs forced me to confront the reality that my husband was living a completely different life than the one he was describing to me during our daily phone conversation. The professional documentation provided by Sarah's investigation removed any possibility that I was misinterpreting social interactions or reading excessive meaning into innocent family activity. The photographic evidence clearly demonstrated systematic deception that extended beyond simple omissions or selective reporting of social events. The report that accompanied the initial photographs also included analysis of the restaurant reservation and payment documentation that Sarah had been able to obtain through her investigative resource. This information revealed that the dinner reservation had been made 2 weeks in advance under Elena's name for a party of 8 people, indicating that the gathering had been planned during the early period of my stay in Portland. The advanced planning timeline provided crucial insight into the intentionality behind the deception I was experiencing. Rather than representing spontaneous social activities that Michael had simply failed to mention during our conversations, the evidence suggested coordinated planning that had begun shortly after my departure for Portland. The payment documentation for the dinner further revealed that Michael had covered the expenses for the entire gathering, suggesting that he had played a central role in organizing and hosting the event rather than simply attending as a guest. This level of involvement contradicted his portrayal of family activities as obligations that he was managing reluctantly during my absence. The second batch of evidence arrived the following day and documented activities that were even more disturbing in their implications for my marriage and my relationship with the Castellano family. Sarah's surveillance team had followed up on leads from the restaurant gathering to investigate other social activities that were occurring with unusual frequency during my absence. The photographs from this second phase of investigation captured Michael and Isabella spending time together without the presence of other family members or the context of larger social gatherings. The images documented what appeared to be private meetings and social activities that suggested a level of personal relationship that extended far beyond family friendship or casual social interaction. The surveillance documentation included photographs of Michael and Isabella having coffee together at a small cafe near the plaza on a Thursday afternoon when Michael had told me he would be working late to manage business responsibilities that had accumulated during my absence. The intimate setting and body language captured in these images suggested personal conversation and emotional connection that was inconsistent with casual friendship or family obligation. Additional photographs captured Michael and Isabella walking together through the Santa Fe Rail Yard district what appeared to be a leisurely afternoon that included browsing art galleries and shopping at boutique stores. The comfortable familiarity evident in their interactions suggested that such activities had become routine rather than representing isolated instances of spending time together. The most damaging evidence in this second batch of photographs documented Michael and Isabella entering a residential building together during an evening when Michael had told me he was attending a business dinner with potential clients. The timing and context of this visit suggested personal rather than professional interaction that was being deliberately concealed from. Sarah's professional analysis of this evidence emphasized that the patterns documented through surveillance indicated ongoing deception that extended beyond the specific incidents captured in photographs. Her experience with matrimonial investigations had taught her to recognize behavioral patterns that suggested sustained emotional and possibly physical involvement that would be impossible to maintain without systematic dishonesty. The timeline analysis that Sarah provided helped me understand that the activities documented through surveillance represented a continuation of relationship patterns that had likely been developing before my departure for Portland rather than opportunistic behavior that had emerged during my absence. The level of comfort and familiarity evident in the photographs suggested established routines and ongoing communication that required extended periods of development. The evidence compilation that Sarah presented also included documentation of communication patterns that supported the photographic surveillance findings. Through her investigative resources, she had been able to verify that Michael and Isabella were maintaining frequent phone and text message contact that coincided with the social activities captured through surveillance. The communication analysis revealed that Michael and Isabella were exchanging messages throughout each day, often during times when Michael was simultaneously having conversations with me about his schedule and activity. This pattern of concurrent communication provided additional evidence of intentional deception rather than simple omission of social activity. The frequency and timing of the documented communication suggested that Michael was maintaining what amounted to parallel relationships with Isabella and me, providing each of us with different information about his activities and availability. The systematic nature of this deception indicated planning and coordination that extended beyond spontaneous poor judgment or emotional confusion. As I reviewed the comprehensive evidence that Sarah had gathered during the first week of investigation, I recognized that I was facing a situation that was far more complex and devastating than I had anticipated when I first hired professional investigative services. The documentation provided clear proof that my husband was systematically deceiving me about fundamental aspects of his daily life and personal relationships. The evidence also revealed that my exclusion from family activities and social events was not the result of practical considerations or temporary adjustments to manage responsibilities during my absence. Instead, the patterns documented through surveillance suggested that my absence had provided cover for activities and relationships that had been developing independently of my awareness or consent. The professional presentation of evidence that Sarah provided helped me process the devastating information in a systematic way that enabled me to understand the full scope of what was occurring without becoming overwhelmed by the emotional impact of individual revelation. Her experience with matrimonial investigations had taught her how to present complex evidence in ways that enabled clients to make informed decisions based on complete understanding rather than emotional reactions to isolated incidents. The investigation findings forced me to confront the reality that my marriage was facing challenges that extended far beyond communication problems or temporary stress related to my extended absence. The evidence documented systematic deception and relationship patterns that suggested fundamental problems with honesty and commitment that could not be resolved through improved communication or mutual understanding. The The strength I drew from my mother's guidance about facing difficult truths provided the emotional foundation for processing this devastating evidence without losing my ability to think clearly about my options and next. Her wisdom about choosing truth over comfortable illusions enabled me to examine the evidence objectively rather than searching for alternative explanations that would allow me to avoid confronting the reality of my situation. The documentation provided by Sarah's investigation created a foundation of factual evidence that would enable me to make informed decisions about my marriage and my future based on complete understanding rather than speculation or partial information. The courage required to review this evidence thoroughly demonstrated my commitment to living authentically and making decisions based on truth rather than hope or denial. The revelation that would transform my understanding of the situation from marital infidelity to elaborate family conspiracy arrived in the form of a single photograph that Sarah Davidson delivered to my secure email account during the second week of surveillance operation. The image captured a moment that initially appeared to be another documentation of Michael and Isabella's growing intimacy, but closer examination revealed details that would expose the true scope of the deception being orchestrated by the entire Castellano family. The photograph showed Michael and Isabella seated at a corner table in the private dining room of La Fonda Hotel, an establishment that served as the unofficial headquarters for Santa Fe's most influential families when conducting business that required discretion and privacy. However, the significance of this particular meeting became clear only when I noticed the documents spread across the table between them and the presence of two additional individuals whose participation in this gathering revealed the systematic nature of what was occurring during my absence. Seated across from Michael and Isabella were Elena Castellano and a man I did not immediately recognize but whose professional appearance and the briefcase positioned beside his chair suggested he was providing legal or financial services to the group.
The formal nature of their interaction, combined with the obvious importance of the documents under discussion, indicated that this gathering represented business planning rather than social interaction. Sarah's investigative report provided crucial context for understanding the significance of this meeting and the identity of the unknown participant. Through her professional resources, she had determined that the fourth person in the photograph was Richard Henley, a prominent estate planning attorney whose practice specialized in family wealth management and matrimonial law for high-net-worth clients throughout New Mexico. The presence of an estate planning attorney at a private meeting between Michael, Isabella, and Elena suggested that the family was engaged in legal and financial planning that would likely affect my interests as Michael's spouse. The formal documentation visible in the photographs indicated that this planning involved substantial assets and legal arrangements that required professional expertise to implement properly. Sarah's analysis of the meeting dynamics captured in the surveillance photographs revealed several concerning patterns that suggested the gathering was focused on developing strategies to manage my legal and financial interests in ways that would minimize my claims to family assets and property. The body language and document positioning captured in the images indicated serious business discussion rather than casual conversation about future possibility. The timing of this meeting, occurring during my extended absence while caring for my dying mother, suggested that the family had deliberately chosen this period to advance legal and financial planning that would be more difficult to implement with my knowledge and potential objection. The coordination required to arrange this meeting indicated that the planning had been developing for some time before my departure provided the opportunity for implementation. The documentation provided by Sarah's investigation also revealed that this meeting was part of a series of similar gatherings that had been occurring throughout my absence, each involving different combinations of family members and professional advisors. The pattern of meetings suggested comprehensive planning that addressed multiple aspects of family business and personal relationships that would affect my position within the family structure. The revelation that the Castellano family was engaging in legal and financial planning during my absence forced me to recognize that I was facing a far more sophisticated and potentially devastating situation than I had initially understood. Rather than dealing with marital infidelity that could potentially be addressed through counseling or relationship repair, I was confronting a coordinated family effort to restructure legal and financial arrangements in ways that would fundamentally alter my security and autonomy. The complexity of the situation I was facing required me to develop knowledge and capabilities that extended far beyond the emotional processing and relationship evaluation that I had initially expected would be necessary. Understanding the legal and financial implications of the family's planning activities would require consultation with professional advisors who could help me assess my rights and develop appropriate protective strategy. The urgency of developing these new capabilities was intensified by the recognition that the family's planning was advancing rapidly during my absence and might result in legal or financial changes that would be difficult to reverse once implemented. The time I was spending in Portland caring for my mother was being used by the Castellano family to advance their interests in ways that could permanently affect my security and options. My first step in developing the knowledge necessary to protect my interests was to research the legal framework governing marital property rights and spousal interests in New Mexico. The state's community property laws provided specific protections for spouses regarding assets acquired during marriage, but I needed to understand how these protections could be affected by estate planning and family business arrangements. The research I conducted into New Mexico community property law revealed that spouses have significant rights to assets acquired during marriage, regardless of which spouse holds legal title to specific properties or investment. However, these rights could be affected by prenuptial agreements, business ownership structures, and estate planning arrangements that might limit spousal claims to certain categories of assets. The legal research also revealed that community property rights could be compromised if assets were transferred or restructured in ways that moved them outside the community property framework before divorce proceedings were initiated. This information highlighted the importance of understanding the family's current planning activities and taking appropriate steps to protect my interests before any irreversible changes were implemented. My investigation into the Castellano family's business structure revealed a complex network of corporations, partnerships, and trusts that had been established over several generations to manage family assets and minimize tax obligations. The sophisticated nature of these arrangements suggested that the family had access to high-level legal and financial expertise that could be used to protect family assets from spousal claims in the event of divorce. The complexity of the family's financial arrangements made it clear that I would need professional legal advice to understand my rights and develop appropriate strategies for protecting my interests. The knowledge I could gain through independent research was insufficient for evaluating the potential impact of the legal and financial planning that the family was pursuing during my absence. My search for appropriate legal counsel focused on identifying attorneys with specific expertise in matrimonial law and community property rights, who also had experience dealing with complex family business structures and estate planning arrangements. The specialized knowledge required for my situation limited the pool of qualified attorneys, but ensured that I would receive advice from someone who understood the sophisticated legal strategies that might be used against my interests. After reviewing multiple firms and conducting preliminary consultations, I selected Patricia Morrison, a matrimonial attorney whose practice focused exclusively on complex divorce cases involving substantial assets and a sophisticated financial arrangement. Patricia's background included experience as a family court judge before transitioning to private practice, providing her with unique insight into how courts evaluate and resolve disputes involving complex marital property issues. My initial consultation with Patricia Morrison provided crucial education about the legal landscape I was navigating and the potential implications of the family planning activities that Sarah's investigation had documented. Patricia's analysis of the surveillance evidence and my description of the family's behavior patterns revealed several concerning possibilities that required immediate attention and protective action. Patricia explained that the presence of an estate planning attorney at family meetings during my absence suggested that the Castellanos were likely pursuing strategies to restructure assets in ways that would limit my community property claims in the event of divorce proceedings. These strategies might include transferring assets to family trusts, restructuring business ownership to exclude spousal interests, or implementing estate planning arrangements that would minimize my inheritance rights. The timing of these activities during my extended absence suggested that the family understood the legal implications of their planning and had deliberately chosen this period to advance arrangements that would be more difficult to implement with my knowledge and potential legal objections. This coordination, indicated sophisticated understanding of matrimonial law and strategic planning designed to maximize their advantage in potential future proceedings. Patricia's assessment of my situation emphasized the importance of taking immediate protective action to preserve my rights and document my interests in family assets before any irreversible changes could be implemented. She recommended several specific steps that would protect my legal position while allowing me to continue gathering information about the full scope of the family's planning activity. The protective measures that Patricia recommended included formal documentation of my awareness of family assets and business interests, establishment of independent financial accounts to ensure my access to resources during potential future proceeding, implementation of monitoring systems to track any significant changes in family business structures or asset ownership during my continued absence. Patricia also advised me to expand the scope of Sarah's investigation to include financial and business activities that might reveal the specific nature of the legal planning that the family was pursuing. This expanded investigation would require specialized expertise in financial analysis and business intelligence that extended beyond traditional matrimonial surveillance, but was necessary for understanding the full scope of the conspiracy I was facing. The recognition that I needed to develop capabilities in financial analysis and legal strategy represented a significant expansion of the challenges I was managing while simultaneously caring for my dying mother. The emotional demands of processing my mother's declining health were now accompanied by the intellectual and strategic demands of protecting myself from a sophisticated family conspiracy that was advancing rapidly during my absence. The support I received from both Sarah Davidson and Patricia Morrison provided crucial guidance for managing these complex challenges without becoming overwhelmed by their scope and urgency. Their professional expertise enabled me to approach the situation systematically rather than reactively, developing comprehensive strategies that addressed both immediate protective needs and longer-term planning requirements. The emotional strength I drew from my mother's continued presence and wisdom provided the foundation for managing these challenges while maintaining my focus on providing appropriate care and attention during her final illness. Her guidance about facing difficult truths and maintaining personal integrity helped me navigate the complex legal and financial considerations without losing sight of my core values and long-term goals. The investigation expansion that Patricia recommended revealed additional evidence of the family's planning activities that confirmed the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy I was facing. The financial analysis conducted by Sarah's team documented several recent changes in family business structures and asset ownership that appeared designed to limit my community property interests and reduce my financial security in the event of divorce. The comprehensive evidence gathering that resulted from this expanded investigation provided the documentation necessary to understand the full scope of the family's activities and develop appropriate legal strategies for protecting my interests. The systematic approach to evidence collection also ensured that I would have the documentation necessary to support legal proceedings if the situation could not be resolved through negotiation or family discussion. The knowledge and capabilities I developed during this period of intensive learning and strategic planning represented a fundamental transformation in how I approached challenges and evaluated my options when facing complex situations. The skills I acquired in legal research, financial analysis, and strategic planning would prove valuable not only for managing my immediate crisis, but also for building long-term security and autonomy regardless of how my marriage ultimately resolved. The recognition that I possessed the intellectual capability and emotional resilience to manage sophisticated legal and financial challenges provided a foundation of confidence that would support me through whatever additional revelations and decisions lay ahead. The investment in developing these new capabilities demonstrated my commitment to protecting my interests and maintaining my autonomy regardless of the obstacles that others might attempt to place in my path. The breakthrough that would fundamentally alter my strategic position in confronting Castellano family conspiracy came through an unexpected connection that demonstrated how professional relationships, built on integrity and mutual respect, can provide crucial support during the most challenging periods of personal crisis. The connection emerged during my third week in Portland when circumstances beyond my control created an opportunity for alliance that would prove essential for protecting my interests and exposing the truth about the systematic deception I was facing. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the lead oncologist managing my mother's care at Rosehaven, had been observing my situation with the professional insight that comes from years of supporting families through terminal illness while managing complex personal challenges that often emerge during periods of extended medical crisis. Her experience had taught her to recognize when patients' family members were dealing with significant external stressors that could affect their ability to provide appropriate support during critical medical situations. During one of our routine conferences about my mother's treatment plan and comfort care protocols, Dr. Chen made an observation that revealed her awareness of my growing distress about matters unrelated to my mother's medical condition. She noted that while I was providing excellent advocacy and emotional support for my mother, I appeared to be managing substantial personal stress that seemed to be intensifying rather than stabilizing as we approached the final stages of my mother's illness. Chen's approach to this sensitive topic reflected both professional expertise and personal compassion that had been refined through years of helping families navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges that accompany terminal illness. She acknowledged that family members often face relationship crises and personal decisions during periods when they are emotionally vulnerable and geographically separated from their normal support systems and professional resources. The conversation that followed provided me with an opportunity to share my concerns about the situation developing in Santa Fe while maintaining appropriate boundaries around the confidential medical information and family dynamics that required discretion. Chen's response demonstrated both professional understanding and personal insight that would prove crucial for connecting me with resources that could provide specialized assistance for the challenges I was confronting. Dr. Chen revealed that her own experience with complex family dynamics during medical crises had taught her the importance of connecting patients and family members with appropriate professional resources when personal relationships and legal issues created additional stress during already difficult periods. She had developed relationships with various professionals throughout the Pacific Northwest who specialized in providing discreet assistance for families dealing with relationship crises that required sophisticated legal or investigative support. The professional network that Dr. Chen described included attorneys specializing in matrimonial law, financial advisors with expertise in asset protection during family transition, and investigative professionals who could provide comprehensive analysis of complex family situations that extended beyond traditional surveillance services. Her willingness to provide referrals and introductions reflected her understanding that addressing external stressors was essential for enabling family members to provide appropriate support during medical crises. Chen recommended would prove transformative for my ability to understand and respond to the Castellano family conspiracy. She introduced me to Margaret Sullivan, a former federal prosecutor who had transitioned to private practice specializing in complex family litigation that involved sophisticated asset concealment and coordinated deception schemes designed to minimize spousal rights during divorce proceedings. Margaret Sullivan's background provided her with unique capabilities for analyzing and responding to the type of systematic family conspiracy that I was confronting. Her experience as a federal prosecutor had involved investigating and prosecuting complex financial crimes that required understanding sophisticated asset transfer schemes and coordinated deception strategies designed to conceal illegal activities from law enforcement and regulatory agencies. The transition from federal prosecution to private practice had enabled Margaret to apply her investigative and analytical capabilities to matrimonial cases that involved similar levels of sophistication and coordination but focused on civil rather than criminal violations. Her expertise in recognizing and documenting complex deception schemes made her particularly effective in representing clients who faced opponents with substantial resources and sophisticated legal strategies. My initial consultation with Margaret Sullivan provided immediate validation that the patterns I had observed and the evidence that Sarah Davidson had documented were consistent with systematic family conspiracies that she had encountered throughout her career in both federal prosecution and private practice. Her professional assessment confirmed that the Castellano family's activities represented coordinated planning that extended far beyond opportunistic deception or spontaneous poor judgment.
Margaret's analysis of the surveillance evidence and legal documentation that Patricia Morrison had helped me compile revealed several concerning patterns that indicated the family was implementing a comprehensive strategy designed to minimize my legal and financial claims while positioning Isabella as Michael's preferred partner for both personal and business relationships. The sophistication of this strategy suggested that the family had been planning this transition for an extended period before my mother's illness provided the opportunity for implementation. The strategic assessment that Margaret provided helped me understand that the conspiracy I was facing involved multiple levels of deception and manipulation that required coordinated response across legal, financial, and investigative domains. Her experience with similar cases had taught her that successful resolution required comprehensive evidence gathering, strategic timing of legal actions, and careful coordination among professional advisors to maximize effectiveness while minimizing the family's opportunities for defensive countermeasures. Margaret's recommendations for expanding my investigative and legal strategy included several specific actions that would strengthen my position while gathering additional evidence of the family's coordinated activity. These recommendations reflected her understanding that complex family conspiracies typically involved multiple areas of deception that could only be fully exposed through systematic investigation of business activities, financial arrangements, and personal relationships. The expanded investigation strategy that Margaret recommended required coordination between Sarah Davidson's surveillance capabilities and additional investigative resources that specialized in financial analysis and business intelligence. This comprehensive approach would provide documentation of the family's activities across all domains, while ensuring that the evidence collection was systematic and legally admissible for potential future proceedings. Margaret also recommended that I develop relationships with financial professionals who could provide independent analysis of the Castellano family's business structures and asset arrangements to identify specific strategies being used to limit my community property interest. This analysis would enable me to understand the full scope of the financial manipulation being implemented during my absence and develop appropriate protective responses. The networking approach that Margaret suggested extended beyond professional service providers to include individuals with the Santa Fe community who might have knowledge of the Castellano family's activities and reputation that could provide additional context for understanding their motivations and capability. Her experience had taught her that community networks often contained individuals who possessed valuable information about family dynamics and business practices that were not publicly documented. The expansion of my professional network during this period required developing skills in relationship building and information gathering that extended beyond my previous experience in nonprofit development work. The urgency of my situation and the sophistication of the opposition I was facing accelerated my learning in areas of strategic communication and alliance building that would prove valuable throughout the remainder of this crisis and beyond. The first significant breakthrough in expanding my network came through Margaret's introduction to David Ramirez, a forensic accountant whose practice specialized in analyzing complex family business structures for matrimonial litigation purposes. David's expertise in tracing asset transfers and identifying concealment strategies had made him particularly effective in cases where families attempted to restructure finances to minimize spousal claims during divorce proceedings. David's initial analysis of the information I had gathered about the Castellano family's business activities revealed several red flags that suggested recent changes in asset ownership and business structures that were consistent with strategies designed to limit my community property interest. His professional assessment indicated that the family had likely been implementing these changes gradually over several months before my departure for Portland, provided cover for accelerating their timeline. The forensic analysis that David conducted also revealed that the Castellano family's business activities included several recent transactions that appeared designed to transfer assets to entities that would be more difficult for me to claim as community property. These transactions included transfers to family trust, restructuring of business partnerships to exclude spousal interests, and investments in entities that were structured to limit claims from family members who were not directly involved in business operations. The documentation that David provided about these financial activities complemented the surveillance evidence that Sarah had gathered about the family's personal relationships and social activity. The combination of financial and personal evidence created a comprehensive picture of coordinated deception that extended across all aspects of the family's activities during my absence. The professional network that I developed during this period also included connections within the Santa Fe community who could provide valuable intelligence about the Castellano family's reputation and recent activities that might not be captured through formal investigation or financial analysis. These connections emerged through the referral networks maintained by my various professional advisors and reflected the value of building relationships based on mutual trust and shared professional standards. One particularly valuable connection came through Patricia Morrison's referral to Amanda Rodriguez, a prominent real estate professional whose practice included substantial involvement in high-end property transactions within the Santa Fe social and business community. Amanda's professional activities had provided her with extensive knowledge of family dynamics and business relationships among the city's influential families, including detailed awareness of the Castellano family's recent activities and reputation. Amanda's insights into the Castellano family dynamics provided crucial context for understanding the personal motivations and family pressures that were driving the conspiracy I was confronting. Her professional observations had revealed that the family had been discussing concerns about my suitability as a long-term family member for several months before my departure for Portland, with particular emphasis on cultural compatibility and commitment to family business interests. The community intelligence that Amanda provided also revealed that Isabella's return to Santa Fe had been accompanied by extensive discussion within the social community about her potential rekindling of her relationship with Michael. These conversations had included speculation about whether my extended absence would provide opportunities for the family to encourage this rekindling without the complications that my presence might create. The networking relationships that I developed during this period demonstrated the power of professional connections built on shared values and mutual respect for helping individuals navigate complex challenges that require specialized expertise and community support. The willingness of these professionals to provide assistance and referrals reflected their recognition that supporting individuals facing sophisticated deception and manipulation served broader professional and community interests. The strategic value of the network I had developed extended beyond the immediate assistance with legal, financial, and investigative needs. The relationships I built during this period provided emotional support and professional validation that helped me maintain confidence and clarity during a period when I was confronting systematic attempts to undermine my security and autonomy. The comprehensive support network that emerged during this period included professionals with complementary expertise who could coordinate their efforts to provide strategic advantages that exceeded what any individual advisor could offer independently. This coordination enabled me to develop responses to the family conspiracy that addressed legal, financial, and personal dimensions simultaneously while ensuring that my actions were strategically sound and legally protected. The transformation that occurred in my approach to challenging situations during this period reflected both the necessity created by my circumstances and the opportunities provided by access to sophisticated professional expertise and community support. The skills I developed in strategic networking and collaborative problem-solving would prove valuable not only for resolving my immediate crisis, but also for building long-term security and professional effectiveness. The foundation of professional relationships and community connections that I established during this period would continue to provide resources and opportunities long after the immediate crisis was resolved. The investment in building these relationships demonstrated the lasting value of approaching challenges through collaboration and mutual support rather than attempting to manage complex situations independently. The confidence I gained through successfully building and leveraging a sophisticated professional network provided crucial validation of my capabilities for managing complex challenges and protecting my interests, even when facing opponents with substantial resources and apparent advantages. This confidence would prove essential for implementing the strategic responses that would ultimately expose the truth about the conspiracy and protect my long-term security and autonomy. The moment that would test every strategic decision I had made and every professional relationship I had built arrived through an unexpected phone call from Michael that shattered the careful equilibrium I had maintained between caring for my dying mother and investigating the conspiracy that was destroying my marriage. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening, interrupting the peaceful quiet of the hospice facility and delivering news that would force me to choose between maintaining my investigative secrecy and protecting my mother during her final day. Michael's voice carried an urgency and distress that I had not heard since the early days of our relationship, when genuine crises had tested our partnership and revealed his capacity for authentic emotion and vulnerability. The contrast between this emotional authenticity and the calculated deception that had characterized our recent communications created a jarring dissonance that immediately put me on high alert about his motivations for making this unexpected contact. The substance of Michael's call centered on what he described as a family emergency that required my immediate return to Santa Fe to provide support and participate in critical decisions about family business matters that could not be delayed until my mother's situation was resolved. His explanation emphasized the urgency of legal and financial issues that had emerged suddenly and required spousal consent and participation to address properly within necessary time frames.
The timing of this supposed emergency, occurring during the peak period of Sarah Davidson's expanded investigation, and just days after my professional network had begun uncovering the most damaging evidence of the family conspiracy, created immediate suspicion about whether this crisis was genuine or represented a strategic attempt to disrupt my investigation and force my return before I had gathered sufficient evidence to protect my interests effectively. Michael's description of the emergency focused on complications with family business agreements that supposedly required immediate attention from all family members, including spouses who held legal interests in certain business entities. He explained that failure to address these issues within a specific time frame could result in significant financial losses and legal complications that would affect our future security and require extensive litigation to resolve. The legal complexities that Michael described involve technical details about partnership agreements, tax obligations, and regulatory compliance issues that would typically require sophisticated legal expertise to evaluate properly. His ability to present these details convincingly while maintaining emotional urgency suggested either genuine crisis or carefully prepared deception designed to exploit my limited knowledge of family business operations. The emotional manipulation embedded in Michael's presentation of this emergency was particularly sophisticated, combining appeals to family loyalty with emphasis on financial consequences that would affect our shared future. His approach acknowledged my caring nature and sense of responsibility while creating pressure to prioritize family obligations over my commitment to my mother during her final illness. The most concerning aspect of Michael's emergency notification was his insistence that the situation required my physical presence in Santa Fe for meetings with attorneys and business partners who would not proceed with necessary agreements without direct spousal participation. This requirement would force me to leave my mother during a critical period when her condition was deteriorating rapidly and her need for family support was most acute. The cruel timing of this supposed emergency, occurring when my mother's medical team had indicated that her condition was approaching the final stages and that family presence was particularly important for her comfort and dignity, suggested either remarkable coincidence or deliberate strategic timing designed to create maximum pressure for compliance with family demands, regardless of the personal cost. My response to Michael's emergency notification required immediate consultation with the professional network I had developed to evaluate the legitimacy of his claims and develop appropriate strategies for protecting my interests while maintaining my commitment to my mother's care. The urgency that Michael had emphasized created pressure for rapid decision-making, that could benefit the family's interests if I responded without adequate analysis and professional guidance. The first consultation I arranged was with Patricia Morrison, whose expertise in matrimonial law enabled her to evaluate the legal aspects of Michael's claims about business emergencies that required spousal participation. Her analysis would determine whether the supposed legal requirements had legitimate foundations or represented manufactured urgency designed to disrupt my investigation and force premature action. Patricia's initial assessment of the legal claims that Michael had presented revealed several inconsistencies and questionable elements that suggested the emergency might be fabricated or substantially exaggerated to create pressure for my return. Her experience with complex family business structures indicated that the types of urgent spousal consent requirements that Michael had described were extremely rare and typically involved circumstances that would have been predictable and manageable with appropriate advance planning. The technical analysis that Patricia conducted of the specific business entities and legal arrangements that Michael had mentioned revealed that most of the supposed urgent requirements could be addressed through remote participation, electronic document execution, or temporary delegation of authority that would not require my physical presence in Santa Fe during the timeframes he had specified. More significantly, Patricia's investigation of the business entities involved in the supposed emergency revealed that several of the most critical agreements Michael had mentioned actually involved assets and partnerships that had been restructured during my absence in ways that had already limited my legal interests and decision-making authority. This discovery suggested that the emergency notification might be designed to obtain my consent for arrangements that had already been implemented without my knowledge. The forensic analysis that David Ramirez conducted of recent business activities related to the supposed emergency provided additional evidence that the crisis had been manufactured or deliberately precipitated to create justification for demanding my immediate return and participation in business decisions that would further limit my legal and financial interests. David's examination of transaction records and business filings revealed that the complications Michael had described as sudden emergencies had actually been developing over several weeks through a series of deliberate actions taken by family business managers during my absence. The pattern of these actions suggested coordinated planning designed to create the appearance of crisis that would justify demands for urgent spousal cooperation. The timeline analysis that David provided demonstrated that the supposed emergency had been precipitated by business decisions made during the period when Sarah's investigation had documented the most extensive coordination between Michael, Isabel, and Elena regarding their legal and social planning. This correlation suggested that the emergency was designed to disrupt my investigation during the period when it was producing the most damaging evidence of their conspiracy. The strategic assessment that Margaret Sullivan provided helped understand that the emergency notification represented a sophisticated attempt to regain control of the situation by forcing me into reactive decision-making that would benefit the family's interests while undermining my investigative efforts and strategic planning. Her experience with complex family conspiracies had taught her to recognize pressure tactics designed to exploit emotional vulnerabilities and family loyalties. Margaret's recommendation was to respond to the emergency notification in ways that would test the legitimacy of the family's claims while protecting my interests and maintaining my investigation timeline. This approach would involve offering alternative solutions that would address any genuine business needs while refusing to compromise my mother's care or my investigative strategy for manufactured urgency. The comprehensive response strategy that my professional team developed involved multiple coordinated actions designed to address the emergency notification while maintaining my strategic position and protecting my long-term interests. The strategy included legal analysis of the business issues Michael had raised, forensic verification of the claimed urgency, and alternative solutions that would satisfy any legitimate business requirements without requiring my premature return to Santa Fe. The legal response that Patricia prepared offered to address any genuine business requirements through remote participation, electronic document execution, and delegation of authority to qualified representatives who could act on my behalf during the supposed emergency period. This response demonstrated my willingness to cooperate with legitimate family business needs, while refusing to accept manufactured urgency that would compromise my other responsibilities and commitment. The forensic documentation that David provided offered to verify the legitimacy of the claimed emergency through independent analysis of business records and regulatory requirements by qualified third-party professional. This offer would either confirm genuine crisis that required immediate attention or expose manufactured urgency designed to manipulate my decision-making through false claims about legal and financial consequences. The strategic communication that Margaret recommended emphasized my commitment to family responsibilities while maintaining clear boundaries around manipulation and deception. The response acknowledged the importance of family business matters while insisting on transparent and honest communication about the actual nature and urgency of any issues that required my attention and participation. The delivery of this comprehensive response to Michael's emergency notification marked a crucial test of whether the family conspiracy would persist in the face of professional resistance or would reveal the manufactured nature of their claimed crisis. The reaction to my response would provide important intelligence about their commitment to their deceptive strategy and their assessment of my capabilities for protecting my interests through professional guidance and strategic planning. Michael's reaction to my comprehensive response revealed both anger and frustration that suggested the emergency notification had been designed to exploit my emotional vulnerabilities rather than address genuine business crises. His inability to provide satisfactory documentation or verification of the claimed urgency exposed the manipulative nature of his emergency notification and confirmed that the family was attempting to disrupt my investigation through manufactured pressure. The failure of the family's emergency strategy marked a significant victory in maintaining my investigative timeline while protecting my commitment to my mother's care during her final illness. The professional response that my team had developed demonstrated that sophisticated manipulation could be effectively countered through careful analysis and strategic communication that insisted on transparency and honesty. The credibility that I established through successfully managing this pressure campaign provided crucial validation of my strategic approach and professional judgment. The family's inability to manipulate me through manufactured emergencies demonstrated that I had developed sufficient knowledge and support to protect my interests even when facing coordinated deception designed to exploit my emotional commitments and family loyalty. The confidence that I gained through this successful resistance to manipulation provided the foundation for continuing my investigation while maintaining my focus on my mother's needs during her final illness. The professional network that had supported me through this crisis had proven its value for protecting my interests while enabling me to honor my commitments to the people who truly deserved my loyalty and attention. The failure of the family's pressure campaign also revealed important intelligence about their assessment of my capabilities and their growing desperation to regain control of a situation that was increasingly exposing their deceptive. Their willingness to manufacture emergencies during my mother's final illness demonstrated the extent of their commitment to their conspiracy and their disregard for basic human decency and family value. This credibility test marked a turning point in my relationship with the family conspiracy, transforming me from a target of manipulation into a strategic opponent who possessed the knowledge and support necessary to protect my interests and expose their deceptive. The professional capabilities I had developed and the network relationships I had built had proven sufficient to withstand sophisticated pressure campaigns and maintain my investigative momentum despite their attempts to disrupt my strategic plan. The revolutionary approach that would expose the complete scope of the Castellano family conspiracy emerged through the strategic integration of multiple investigation methodologies that my professional network had developed during the preceding weeks of systematic evidence gathering. Breakthrough came when Margaret Sullivan proposed a coordinated surveillance and documentation strategy that would capture the family's activities during a critical period when they believed their manufactured emergency had successfully disrupted my investigation and forced my compliance with their demands. The innovation that Margaret recommended involved creating the appearance that I had accepted the family's emergency notification and was preparing to return to Santa Fe as requested, while simultaneously implementing enhanced surveillance and documentation procedures
that would capture their activities during the period when they believed they had regained control of the situation. This approach would reveal their true intentions and activities when they believed they were no longer under scrutiny. The strategic deception that Margaret proposed required careful coordination among my entire professional team to ensure that all communications and activities would support the impression that I was responding to family pressure while maintaining the integrity of our investigation. The complexity of this approach reflected the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy we were confronting and the need for equally sophisticated countermeasures to expose their activities. The psychological foundation for this strategy relied on the principle that individuals engaged in deceptive activities often reveal their true intentions and plans when they believe they have successfully manipulated their targets and removed threats to their scheme. Margaret's experience with complex family conspiracies had taught her that the period immediately following apparent victory often provided the most revealing evidence of long-term intentions and coordination. The implementation of this strategic deception required careful management of communications with Michael and Elena to maintain the impression that I was complying with their demands, while avoiding actual commitment to actions that would compromise my investigation or my mother's care. The communication strategy needed to provide sufficient reassurance to reduce their vigilance, while maintaining enough ambiguity to preserve my options for continued investigation. The enhanced surveillance operations that Sarah Davidson implemented during this period involved expanded monitoring of family activities, business meeting and social interactions that would likely intensify during the period when they believed they had successfully resolved the threat posed by my investigation. The surveillance strategy included documentation of communications, financial activities, and legal meetings that would reveal the true scope of their planning. The technical innovation that Sarah introduced involved the use of advanced surveillance equipment and coordination with special investigators who could provide comprehensive documentation of complex family and business activities that extended beyond traditional matrimonial surveillance capability. This enhanced approach would ensure that all aspects of the family's activities were documented with sufficient detail and legal admissibility to support future proceedings. The financial monitoring that David Ramirez implemented during this period involved real-time tracking of business transactions, asset transfers, and legal filings that would likely accelerate once the family believed they had eliminated the threat of discovery and legal challenge. The financial surveillance would provide immediate notification of any actions that could affect my interests or legal position. The legal preparation that Patricia Morrison coordinated involved developing comprehensive documentation and procedural strategies that would enable rapid response to any family actions that threatened my interests during the period when they believed they had regained control of the situation. The legal preparedness would ensure that any harmful actions could be immediately challenged and potentially reversed through appropriate legal proceedings. The coordination among my professional team during this critical period required daily communication and strategic planning sessions that ensured all activities were synchronized to maximize the effectiveness of our comprehensive surveillance and documentation strategy. The teamwork approach enabled us to maintain awareness of all aspects of the family's activities, while preserving the operational security necessary for successful strategic deception. The first major breakthrough in our enhanced surveillance operations came within 48 hours of implementing the strategic deception, when family activities immediately intensified in ways that revealed the true scope and timeline of their conspiracy. The acceleration of their activities confirmed that their emergency notification had been designed to disrupt my investigation during a critical period when they were implementing final stages of their coordinated plan. The surveillance documentation revealed that the family had scheduled multiple meetings with legal and financial advisors during the period when they believed I would be returning to Santa Fe and would be distracted by the supposed business emergency. The meetings included participants and topics that had not been mentioned in any of their previous communications, and suggested that significant additional planning had been occurring beyond what we had previously documented. The most significant revelation came through Sarah's documentation of a comprehensive planning session that occurred at Elena's residence and included Michael, Isabella, Richard and several additional legal and financial advisors, whose presence indicated that the family was implementing complex strategies that extended far beyond the business emergency that Michael had described in his urgent phone call. The audio surveillance that Sarah's enhanced equipment captured during this meeting provided unprecedented insight into the family's actual intentions and the sophisticated nature of their planning. The conversations revealed that the supposed business emergency had been manufactured specific to force my return and obtain my consent for legal arrangements that would finalize the transfer of assets and legal authority in ways that would eliminate my claims to family property and business interests. The recorded conversations also revealed that the family had been coordinating Isabella's family to develop business partnerships and social arrangements that would formalize her integration into family operations, while systematically excluding me from future planning and decision-making processes. The coordination between the families suggested that the conspiracy involved multiple parties working together to restructure relationships and financial arrangements. Most devastatingly, the surveillance recordings captured detailed discussions about timeline and procedures for initiating divorce proceedings that would minimize my financial claims while positioning Isabella as Michael's intended future partner for both personal and business relationships. The conversations revealed that this planning had been developing for months before my departure for Portland provided the opportunity for implementation. The legal documentation that the surveillance revealed included draft agreements for asset transfers, business restructuring, and estate planning modifications that would have been presented for my signature under the guise of addressing the manufactured business emergency. The comprehensive nature of these documents demonstrated that the family had invested substantial time and resources in developing strategies to minimize my legal and financial interests. The financial analysis that David conducted of the proposed agreements revealed that implementing arrangements would have effectively eliminated my community property rights to most family assets, while creating legal obligations that would have made it extremely difficult for me to challenge the transfers or recover my interests through future legal proceedings. The strategic coordination that the surveillance documented included detailed planning for managing the divorce proceedings in ways that would minimize publicity and legal costs, while ensuring that the family maintained control of business operations and asset ownership. The conversations revealed their assessment that I lacked the knowledge and resources necessary to challenge their sophisticated legal strategies effectively. The revelation that the family had been planning divorce proceedings while maintaining the appearance of normal marriage represented the ultimate betrayal that confirmed the complete absence of genuine commitment to our relationship. The systematic nature of their planning demonstrated that their deception extended far beyond opportunistic infidelity to comprehensive conspiracy designed to eliminate me from their lives while protecting their interests. The evidence compilation that resulted from our enhanced surveillance operations provided comprehensive documentation of criminal fraud, conspiracy, and asset concealment that extended far beyond the civil violations typically involved in matrimonial disputes. Margaret's assessment indicated that the family's activities included multiple violations of state and federal laws that could result in serious legal consequences beyond the financial and personal impacts of divorce proceedings. The strategic advantage that our surveillance breakthrough enabled us to shift from defensive investigation designed to protect my interests to offensive legal action that could expose the family's criminal activities while recovering damages for the extensive deception and financial manipulation that had occurred during our marriage. The comprehensive evidence would support both civil and criminal proceedings that could result in significant financial recovery and legal accountability. The psychological impact of discovering the complete scope of the family's conspiracy was initially overwhelming, but the strength of the evidence and the support of my professional team provided the foundation for transforming devastating betrayal into strategic advantage that would enable me to protect my interests while ensuring appropriate consequences for their criminal activity. The innovation that our coordinated approach represented demonstrated how strategic thinking and professional collaboration could overcome even sophisticated conspiracy involving substantial resources and legal expertise. The success of our enhanced surveillance strategy proved that determined investigation supported by professional expertise could expose criminal activities, regardless of the apparent advantages possessed by the perpetrator. The confidence that I gained through successfully exposing the complete truth about the family conspiracy provided crucial validation of my decision to seek professional assistance and maintain my investigation despite the emotional costs and family pressure. The comprehensive evidence that we had gathered would enable me to proceed with legal action from a position of strength, rather than the defensive position that the family had intended to force me into through their manufactured emergency and systematic deception. The foundation for future legal proceedings that our investigation had established would ensure that the family would face appropriate consequences for their criminal conspiracy, while I recovered both financial damages and personal vindication for the extensive deception and betrayal that had characterized their treatment of our marriage and my contributions to their family and business success. The strategic planning skills that I had developed through managing this complex investigation would provide lasting capabilities for protecting my interests and building future success based on authentic relationships, transparent communication, rather than the deception and manipulation that had characterized my experience with the Castellano family conspiracy. The systematic presentation of evidence that would transform the legal landscape surrounding my marriage began with a carefully orchestrated disclosure strategy that Margaret Sullivan developed to maximize the impact of our comprehensive investigation, while maintaining the element of surprise that had proven so effective in exposing the family conspiracy. The timing and methodology of this disclosure reflected sophisticated understanding of legal procedure, psychological dynamics, and strategic communication that would ensure the evidence received appropriate consideration from all relevant parties. The foundation for our disclosure strategy rests on the principle that overwhelming evidence presented through proper legal channels would create immediate pressure for the family to abandon their conspiracy and negotiate resolution from a defensive position, rather than the offensive position they had maintained through systematic deception and manipulation. Margaret's experience with complex family litigation had taught her that comprehensive evidence disclosure often resulted in rapid settlement discussions when the exposed parties recognized the futility of continuing their deceptive practices. The legal framework that Patricia Morrison established for presenting our evidence involved formal notification to all parties who had participated in or benefited from the family conspiracy, including legal and financial advisors who had provided professional services that facilitated the fraudulent activities we had documented. The comprehensive notification strategy would ensure that all participants understood the scope of evidence we possessed and the potential legal consequences they faced for their involvement in the conspiracy. The formal disclosure process began with detailed documentation packages delivered simultaneously to Michael, Elena, Isabella, Richard Henley, and all business entities and financial institutions that had participated in the asset transfer and concealment activities that our investigation had exposed. The coordination of these deliveries ensured that no single party would have advance warning that might enable destruction of evidence or coordination of defensive strategies. The evidence packages that we delivered included comprehensive surveillance documentation, financial analysis, legal opinions, and expert testimony that established clear patterns of criminal fraud, conspiracy, asset concealment, and matrimonial deception that violated multiple state and federal statutes. The professional presentation of this evidence demonstrated that our investigation had achieved the standards of documentation and analysis required for successful prosecution in both civil and criminal proceedings. The immediate response to our evidence disclosure revealed the effectiveness of our strategic approach and the devastating impact of comprehensive truth presentation on individuals who had believed their sophisticated deception would remain undetected. The reactions from different parties provided valuable intelligence about their respective levels of involvement in the conspiracy and their assessment of the legal consequences they faced. Michael's initial response demonstrated shock and panic that suggested he had not anticipated the scope of evidence we had gathered or the professional sophistication of our investigation. His attempts to contact me directly were intercepted by Patricia Morrison, who informed him that all future communication must occur through legal counsel and must address the criminal and civil violations that our evidence had documented. Elena's reaction involved immediate consultation with independent legal counsel, suggesting that she recognized the serious nature of the charges that our evidence could support and understood that her previous legal advisors might have conflicts of interest that would prevent effective representation in proceedings involving their own potential liability for facilitating fraudulent activity. Isabella's response included attempts to distance herself from the conspiracy by claiming that she had been unaware of the illegal aspects of the family's planning and had believed that the asset transfers and legal arrangements were legitimate family business activity. Her attempts to minimize her involvement contradicted the surveillance that documented her active participation in planning meetings where criminal activities were explicitly discussed. Richard Henley's reaction involved immediate cessation of legal services to the family and notification that he would be seeking independent counsel to address potential professional liability and criminal exposure resulting from his participation in activities that violated professional ethical standards and legal requirements. His abandonment of the family's legal representation provided additional confirmation of the serious nature of the violation our evidence had exposed. The financial institutions that had facilitated asset transfers during the conspiracy period implemented immediate holds on accounts and transactions pending legal review of their potential involvement in fraudulent activity.
The institutional response demonstrated that our evidence had achieved the professional standards necessary to trigger regulatory and legal compliance procedures that would prevent further asset concealment or transfer activities. The business partners and associates who had participated in the restructuring activities that were designed to limit my legal claims initiated their own legal consultations to assess their potential liability for unknowing participation in fraudulent schemes. The professional response from these parties indicated that our evidence presentation had achieved credibility that commanded serious attention from sophisticated business and legal professionals. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.